Guys, this is your girl Wakeji Kamore and welcome to Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. Welcome to your daily dose of the Bible summary, chapter by chapter, done by none other but Wakeji Kamore, and also sometimes I get help. So if you're here for the very first time, you do not want to miss the end of this video, or rather the last part of this video, because that is where the goodies are, that is where the lessons are. So please stick to the end. And for my listeners who are, like my diehards, please keep it locked and invite as many people to learn from what it is that you're learning from. So we're in the book of Judges, and today we are going to be covering Judges chapter 2, and I'm going to be reading this chapter word for word from the NLT, which is the New Living Translation. So try as much as possible to follow through and to keep track as I read. So here it goes. The angel of the Lord went up. So in this chapter, there's a little bit of some of the things that happened in the book of Joshua. So you realize them when you see them. Like you will know when they're happening. The angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim. And he said to the Israelites, I brought you out of the land of Egypt into this land that I swore to give your ancestors. And I said I would never break my covenant with you. For your part, you are to not make any covenants with the people living in this land, but instead you are to destroy all their altars, but you disobeyed my command. Why did you do this? So now I declare that I will no longer drive out the people living in your land. There will be thorns on your side, and their gods will be a constant temptation to you. Because they had refused to completely destroy these nations, God was like, I'm not even going to drive them out anymore. They're going to constantly be a thorn in your flesh, because they're going to constantly be fighting with them or constantly be oppressing them. And their gods are going to be a constant temptation to them. When the angel of the Lord finished speaking to all the Israelites, the people wept loudly. So they called the place Bochim, which means weeping, and they offered sacrifices to the Lord. After Joshua sent the people away, each of the tribes left to take possession of their land allotted to them. And the Israelites served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and the leaders who outlived him. This is the part I'm saying. A part of it is some of the things that actually happened in the book of Joshua. And the Israelites served the Lord throughout the time. And the Israelites served the Lord throughout the time of Joshua and the leaders who outlived him. Those who had seen all the great things that the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of God, died at the age of 110. They buried him in the land he had been allocated at Timnath Serah, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. After the generation died, another generation grew up who did not acknowledge the Lord or remember the mighty things that he had done for Israel. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight and served the images of Baal, or rather they worshipped Baal. They abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors who had brought them out of Egypt. They went after other gods, worshipping the gods of the people around them, and they angered the Lord. The Lord abandoned them. It doesn't say that. It does not say that. It says they abandoned the Lord to serve Baal and the image of Ashtoreth. This made the Lord burn with anger against Israel. So he handed them over to the raiders who stole their possessions. He turned them over to their enemies all around, and they were no longer able to resist them. Every time Israel went out to battle, the Lord fought against them, causing them to be defeated, just as he had warned, and the people were in great distress. Then the Lord raised up judges to rescue the Israelites from the attacks. Yet Israel did not listen to the judges, but prostituted themselves by worshipping other gods. How quickly they turned away from the path of their ancestors, who had walked in obedience to the Lord's command. Whenever the Lord raised up a judge over Israel, he was with that judge, and rescued the people from the enemies throughout the judge's lifetime. For the Lord took pity on his people, who were burdened with oppression and suffering. But when the judge died, the people returned to their corrupt ways, behaving worse, behaving worse than they had, behaving worse than those that had lived before them. They went after other gods, serving and worshipping them, and they refused to give up their evil practices and their stubborn ways. So the Lord burned with anger against Israel. He said, because of these people have violated my covenant, which I made with their ancestors, and have ignored my commands, I will no longer drive out the nations that Joshua left and conquered when he died. I did this to test Israel, to see whether or not they would follow the ways of the Lord as their ancestors did. This is why the Lord left those nations in their place. He did not quickly drive them out to allow Joshua to conquer them all. Wow, that is interesting. So interesting. So one of the things that I I keep wondering is that, have you ever wondered how and why that every generation that comes after us, sin even worse than we were? Let me tell you, we, and by we, I mean the children of the 80s. Or before. Let me include the ones before. If you're in the children of the 90s, the children of, you're not in the we I am referring to. We, the children of the 80s, did some crazy stuff. But let me tell you, have you seen the children of the 1990s and the children of 2000s? Oh my goodness, they are doing crazy stuff. Like, oh my God. And even Satan is like, whoa, yo, hold up. I didn't even think I was going to be that successful. Like, you guys have outdone it. Like, you guys have actually outdone themselves. That did not start happening now. The Bible records that every time a judge died, the people returned to their corrupt ways, behaving worse than those that had lived before them. So at this point, Joshua had died, all the people that were his age mates had died, and this meant that we had now a new generation of people who did not quite have a personal and intimate relationship with God. We've had many generations. We have the generation that was rescued from Egypt, and those ones saw God face to face, like they saw God for themselves. And then we have the generation that came after the 40 years in the wilderness, and their interaction with God was through Moses and Joshua. And a miracle that they saw when they were crossing the river Jordan. That was like their interaction with God. And then we have other generations that came after Joshua and were born into a world where Israelites and other nations like Canaanites, were cohabiting because they had not driven them out. So they were cohabiting. And this meant that this new generation that was born after Joshua was born into a world that had options. They had the mighty God of Israel, and then they had other idols. They had Baal, they had Ashtoreth, they had Asherah, they had Chemosh, they had Molech, as in they had many other two idols that they had options of the gods that they could worship. Does this sound familiar? I think it sounds very, very familiar. I have encountered countless parents of young people who were born in families that worshiped God, but now their kids are so exposed to other religions, to other spiritual experiences or energies. I don't know, people are calling them spiritual energies, and even atheism. And the parents feel so powerless and they just don't know what to do. So what lessons and what principles can we learn from this story and this pattern that is a pattern of the Israelites? And what it is that we can apply now in the challenges that we have now, what is that as parents or as the older generation can apply now that can help us a little bit mitigate the problem? Not even a little bit, can help us mitigate the problem. So one of the things that we see is that every time, underline that, every time a judge died, every time what? A judge died, the Israelites sinned even more than the previous generation. So with the death of a judge, it meant that the Israelites had no one to retell them or to remind them of the wonders that God had done. It had nobody to remind them of the miracles, had nobody to remind them of how they were rescued from Egypt. Like with the death of a judge meant that nobody was retelling the stories. And so it meant that there's nobody reminding people of the laws, nobody reminding people of what God had done. And that meant, if the new generation don't know, then they have no personal and intimate relationship with God. They don't think of him as our God. They're just like, there's a God there, the God of Abraham, the God of Israel, the God of, but they don't think of him as their God. So judges in this time represented a leader or a figure of authority who led the Israelites back into worshiping God. And how he did that is by reminding them of who God was, what he had done in the past, and showing them of things that he was currently doing things even at that specific time of the existence of a judge. So judge represented an authority or a figure of authority who would lead Israel back into the worshiping of God. And every time a judge died means every time there was a gap in authority, every time there was a gap in leadership, the Israelites would do as they pleased. Wanafanya kile wanataka. All right. So take that notion of every time there is a gap, every time there's an authority gap or a leadership gap, the Israelites will do whatever it is that they want. Take that and let us bring it to the smallest unit of society, which is the family unit. Every time there is a gap in authority and leadership, the children will do whatever they want. In a family setup, saa zile hakuna authority, hakuna leadership, watoi watafanya kile wanataka, because there's nobody to say, here we don't do that here. Unasikia? Sisi tufanyangi hivyo hapa. Hii familia tuna worship God, na God anakaa hivi. These are the things that we do. These are the things that we do not do. So every time there is a gap in authority or a gap in leadership, in a family unit, the kids will do whatever it is that they want. One of the other things that looks like it had happened in the Israelites, at the time of Israelites, that it seems like the Israelites had abandoned this role of telling of God's greatness to the leaders. So they had said the leaders or the judges are the ones who come and retell of the laws, or they're the ones who come and retell of the goodness of God and what it is that he had done. They had not taken that role for themselves and made it a personal role. Like, it is my personal role to tell my family. Then they were like, kama hakuna leader, hakuna mtu anatushow, kama hakuna, like, they did not take that role personally. Unfortunately, that is exactly what has happened in our generations. We have abandoned that role to Sunday schools. We have abandoned that role to churches. We have abandoned that role to Christian unions in high school. And we have not taken it as a personal role. You have not taken it as it is my personal role as a parent to teach my children the ways of God. It is my personal role as a parent to teach them who God is, what God looks like, what is godly and what is not godly. What God has done for me in the past, what are the things that he has helped me with, what are the things that he has achieved for me, what has knowing God done for me. We haven't taken that role personally, unfortunately. So my challenge is this. How about, because the command is very clear. Tell the new generations of the things that God has done before. Tell the new generations of the laws. Tell the new generation of the wondrous deeds and the praiseworthy deeds that the Lord has done. How about we take that role as a personal, individual role? How about we take it as a personal, individual role in your own family setup? You can set up a day and say, you know what, this day in a week, we sit down and we talk about God. We can talk about questions that people have about God. Kids can ask questions. It could be like a free places where you can ask questions. It can be a free place where you teach the kids the stories of the Bible. You can listen to these videos together and just share the lessons that you guys are learning. You can read through a book together. Like, actually take it as a personal role to teach about God. And don't abandon it to leaders. Because if there's a leadership gap here in the family setup, trust me, even in that level, there'll be a leadership gap. So you mend this leadership gap in your family unit so that then it can mend even the leadership gap that is there in that other high unit. Psalms chapter 78, verse 4 to 7, it says, this is where the command is. Psalms 78, verse 4 to 7, it says, "We will not hide from their children. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power and his wonders that he has done. His decrees, statutes for Jacob, and established the laws in Israel, which he commanded our forefathers to tell their children." It wasn't just commanded to the leaders, it was commanded to the forefathers. Like kila mtu ambie watoto wake, to tell their children, so the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. They would put their trust in God and would not forget the deeds, but would keep his commands. It is my prayer that we take this command seriously and we take it personally, and we start to apply it in the family unit, which is the smallest unit of the society. And if every unit of the society started to actually do these things, then we wouldn't have this big issue in our hands, because now every family would actually have taken the responsibility, and they would rise up into those leadership roles. They would rise up into those authority roles, so that there will not be a gap. It is my prayer that God will give us wisdom to know how to share him, to share his word, to share his deeds, his laws, that he would teach us and give us the wisdom to share his values to our children and to the younger generation. And that as we train those children and the younger generation in the ways that they should go, that they will not depart from it, even when they are old. This is your girl, Wakeji Kamore, and this has been Reflections by Wakeji Kamore.